Most bankers aren't ready to help you until after their third cup of coffee. But with Central National Bank's after-hours service, you don't have to wait for the bank lobby to open to get help. You can contact us from 6 to 8:30 in the morning or from 5 to 10 in the evening, and we'll connect you to a real, live, local person who can answer questions and fix problems 7 days a week. Bank different. Bank Central. Central National Bank. Member FDIC.
I'm looking at this, and Kemba shoots 3 of 12 for the fourth quarter. 3 of 12.
Uh-huh.
The chances of that happening again on any other night are so slim. It's kind of ridiculous. I want to give.
I'm not arguing that game wasn't ridiculous.
This team in general, we joked about this on Blazers Outsiders last week. They went 4-1 on the last road trip, and then they were like, "Oh, they're going to go 0-4 somehow at home, and then they'll find a way to go 4-1 on this road trip again." And it was the most tongue-in-cheek thing I think I've said in years. And I
don't know why that surprises you, Dan. I don't know. After all of these years of being a Blazer fan, that surprises you.
I mean, well, even with all the weirdness that has been Portland and how they've played, the one constant really has been that they play well at home. Like, for them to go 0-4 on a homestand, I'd have to dig back in the record books. I'm sure the Blazers have this. That's got to be, like, other than the Jail Blazer years, how many times have they really gone that bad at home? Like, over.
I think things are tough at home this year because I think the crowd is running out of patience and they can feel it. And then there was booing and you can feel the tension. And I switched sections this year from one section into a different section, and the vibe in it was different. And I'm starting to wonder if it's really just the vibe in the whole arena is different because everybody's sitting there. We had all these, of course it goes down to expectations. What expectations did we as fans have coming in this year or last year or any other year? The last couple of years, we've been able to sort of adjust our expectations based on, LaMarcus is gone. It's a brand new team. It's our second year. We've got some continuity, but we understand things happen. People are getting injured. This year, everyone came in. It was like, okay, they should be locked in. There should be no excuses. And I can feel the difference in the arena of just like the tension in there.
Yeah. We started talking about this last week when we had with Dave DeFore on, in the apathy, it seems at times for this team, and like the
apathy on the team or towards the team?
Towards the team. And it's okay. Really weird to have that idea, that thought, because maybe I don't know how much of this is just going back to the younger years and how everything was better, blah, 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 blah. But I remember, growing up, my family having season tickets and going to games as a kid, and that place being so loud that I had to, cut my hands over my mouth and scream during playoff games to talk to my dad. Like, I remember the Utah Jazz series when Brian Grant got his eyebrows busted open by Karl Malone. And I remember the flames being shot up before the game, and you could feel the heat and the hairs in your arms standing up, and the atmosphere was like that, like leading up to the game, like the day before. You could feel it in the community. And right now, like, you go around the different forums, the Facebook, Blazers Edge, Reddit, wherever you go, while people are certainly they still love this team. There's no doubt about that. But it feels like the attitude has changed for the first time I can remember it changing. And remember, you have to keep me out of the Jail Blazer era because I literally wasn't in the country. So I didn't get to experience that. So this is my first time experiencing I don't want to, is it pushback?
Well,
it's weird.
I have this like, I think I understand the direction that you're going, but I think I have a sort of different or maybe additional layer to it. And I think part of it is our ability now. It's kind of a blessing and a curse how much immediate information we have before, during, and after games. So we can immediately go back and dive into every single thing, anything that we want to, that we stand out and, thinks was the thing, we think is the thing that derailed the whole course of the game or derailed the team for this thing. Like, we can go and we can find it and we can pinpoint it and circle and share it on Twitter. And I'm saying we as like the royal we as fans. And we can get all caught up into the minutia where we're so focused in on that one play where, somebody let somebody get by, rather than taking a step back and enjoying the whole thing for what it was. Like, for example, take that game last night. We have to talk about last night, right? Wait, are we recording?
Oh, yeah. We're absolutely on right now. And let's remind everybody, the Blazers are on a 3-game winning streak right now. Hey, and welcome to the Blazers Edge podcast, where everything is great.
Dan, that sounds sarcastic.
It's just so, it just sums up this team right now. Like, everything is, we're sitting here like, okay, at least I am. The Portland Trailblazers had zero business winning that game. They didn't score a single basket down the stretch. Kemba Walker's 3 of 12, 7 of 26 for the game. They turned the ball over 19 times. The Blazers did. They shot 50% from the free throw line as the best free throw shooting team in the league. I ran the numbers just on Basketball Reference just because I was like, I wonder how freaky this occurrence was. Since 83-84, 28 other teams have had 19 or more turnovers and shot 50% or less from the free throw line and won a game. So less than one team a year out of almost 1,300 games a year, a team has been able to pull this off.
Okay, but so that's part of my point, Dan, is you were able to like laser focus in on that and pull that out and say, look how horrible that was, based on the fact that only 28 teams have been worse.
You can do that without looking that up. You could look on the court and just go, there's no way they should have won this game. They didn't score a single field goal for the last, 4 minutes?
But, Dan, I thought it was all about winning. I keep saying that I don't care about winning that much, and then you get all mad at me because you say it's all about winning. It's all about winning. Okay, so last night they won. So why are we mad about that?
It's about winning the right way.
Oh, now we have to win the right way. Because I also remember a time where everybody was complaining about, or not everybody, but there were people complaining about how they won the first game in such a giant fashion that skewed everything. And we had to spend 25 games talking about how the Phoenix game screwed up all of the stats and they're not really that good.
It did.
What I'm saying is that sometimes we just dig in too deep and we don't stand back and just go, you know what? We shouldn't have won that game, but we did, and I'm going to take it.
Okay, if you want to take it as a singular focus of, I'll take that win, sure, I can get behind that. I'm looking more on the 30,000-foot level of what that means to this team. Is that something you can build off of? No. Every single one of those guys in the locker room post-game would tell you the same thing. If you took those guys and you gave them truth serum, I almost guarantee you, to a man, they would tell you they didn't deserve to win that game. So that's not something you can build off of. That you're not getting confidence from that. I mean, you look at everybody's stat line from the game, and you're sitting there going, no, everybody was great that game. I mean, it was just, I don't know, it was just really, really funky. I mean, I said post-game.
We're going to have to decide. We're going to have to decide where we come down on the side of whether or not it's okay to have bad wins or good losses. Because if it's not okay to have,
you can have bad wins, but you just can't have a majority of bad wins. Look at this road trip. How many of these games have been good wins so far? These 3 straight: Orlando, Miami, and Charlotte. 3 teams.
I don't know if it's all about winning, then they're all good.
I would disagree to that point.
I'm like 75% giving you a hard time because I know how much you like excellence.
But see, here's the thing.
You know how much I like
we want to go
chaos.
full meta on this is because the Charlotte game was a perfect example of Damian Lillard creating for others. He had 11 assists in that game. Like, he was slinging the ball left, right, and center, and the Blazers scored a whopping 93 points. How about instead of having Damian Lillard try to create for everybody else, how about we go back to the idea of having Damian Lillard be the superstar scorer that he is?
What were his shots and attempts last night?
He was 7 of 19.
So he had 19, and that's a little bit less than usual for him. Is that right? Okay, he usually has on 24, something like
23, I think, is what he's averaging. But, I mean, there were long stretches of the game where, and people can point to, him having an off night and Alfred Aminu having an off night. Okay, that's fine. The Blazers still shot 46% as a team and almost 42% from three and scored 93 points. Oh, that's right. That's because they had 19 turnovers. So, I mean,
well, okay. I think we should back it up a little bit and try to put a little bit of structure to this conversation, because we could go on and on like this.
I'm just going to keep going back to those numbers because they're so ridiculously outside the boundaries of what is not acceptable, but typical. Even like the far outreaches of typical NBA basketball. If you put the Blazers in the Hornets in those exact situations, 100 times, I bet you the Blazers lose at least 65 of them. Bare minimum.
Yeah, I won't argue with you about that.
It was, and I think it was probably more than that, but I'm being a little optimistic and thinking Dame could maybe his miraculous shots or CJ's ability to hit shots on the stretch. And we're going to talk about CJ and these freaking free throws eventually. This is driving me nuts, man.
Okay, let's start off by talking about. So they're on this road trip. How do you feel about the lineups that Coach Stotts has been rolling out lately? One of the things that I've found very interesting is that Evan Turner has been in the starting lineup. He's only started 6 games this year, including the last 5, I think. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on Evan Turner in the starting lineup.
If you're going to put Evan Turner out there, put him out there with the most shooters possible. Like, that's his inability or ineffectiveness outside of 15 feet this year is just beyond the fact that it's terrible. It's sad. Like, you kind of feel bad for the guy in a sense, because Evan Turner, the dude, is awesome. I love him. And even his skill set, when he gets going, it's great. I love it. But the way teams have just adjusted their scouting reports so staunchly away from guys like him and Harkless, it would be funny if it wasn't so sad.
Wait, what do you mean how they've adjusted their scouting reports away from them? Do you mean like they've just
physically
the
away
scouting
from
reports
them.
Are now just saying ignore them?
Yeah. If Evan Turner or Maurice Harkless are outside of 10 feet, they're ineffective to the point of if they hit 5 or 6 of these shots, it doesn't matter. Like, that's just the nature of the beast. Like, they are getting full-on Andre Roberson, Tony Allen treatment, which is just nutty.
And that means there's extra people to double Dame and CJ because there's nobody running out on or whoever they're in there with. Okay, but so we do have like you start off by saying you if you're going to play Evan Turner, play him with as many shooters as possible. I was looking at how Evan Turner does as a starter versus off the bench, and I am curious what you think about like how much of this has to do with the fact that who he's playing with off the bench versus who he's playing with the starters or whatever. But just to run down how Evan Turner's been doing as a starter versus when he was coming off the bench. His field goal percentage as a starter is 51% versus 38% coming off the bench. His offensive rating is 105 versus off the bench 88.
Oh, God.
That seems like a really big, yeah. His defensive rating as a starter 103, off the bench it was 106. So
better,
I don't know,
better. It's amazing what happens when you put a player around better players.
Right, and I'm gonna even give you my least favorite statistic, but I think in this case might be worth commenting on. Yeah, plus minus. As a starter, he's plus 10.7, and off the bench, he's negative 1.9.
Yeah.
So how much of that has to do with just like but how much of it has to do with the fact that he's right? Yeah. But also, does any of it have to do with him being a better fit with those players?
It's both.
Because I don't think he's a great fit with the guys off the bench.
No, it's both really. Mm-hmm. He could be great off the bench if he had guys that could hit the shot alongside him. Mm-hmm. Like if you're playing Evan Turner, Al-Farouq Aminu, and Maurice Harkless, if those three are ever on the floor at the same time, and Ed Davis, like if you swap Harkless for Aminu and Ed Davis, you have three absolute non-shooters on the floor. It doesn't matter how good of a shooter Pat Connaughton or Shabazz Napier are at that point in time. Like just the floor space and the way. Okay, teams are very, very smart nowadays. And it's about playing the long game. That's what scouting reports do. They're playing the odds. The scouting report says this guy, and this guy can't shoot. Single cover here, double cover the guys that can, and live with what happens. And that's been the MO of what Portland has run into this entire season. Now, if you put Evan Turner in a lineup with CJ McCollum on one side, Damian Lillard on the other, and Yusuf Nurkic rolling down the middle of the paint, when he catches, and there was actually a play to start the game against Charlotte or Orlando. I can't remember which one it was now. I think it might have been Orlando. But Nurkic caught the ball to the left elbow, and Turner popped up from the paint and caught a dribble handoff on the left elbow with Nurk handing the ball and immediately setting the screen, and got basically his favorite shot in the league, which is that 14, 15-footer, completely and totally uncontested. And guess what? It went in. So all of a sudden, the things that you want to take away from him, his post-up game or his ability to facilitate from the mid-range or create a shot off the bounce, those things are all there. Because you're more worried about what CJ and Dame and Nurkic are going to do. So now that opens things up for everybody else as well in those other areas.
So let me ask it this way. Do you think it's something that will continue going forward?
How much were you getting out of Maurice Harkless?
Let's see. His numbers.
Let's not do that to Mo. The answer is nothing. Let's not throw the actual numbers out there. because they're bad. Like I've just kept an eye on him all season. He's gotten back-to-back DNPs after being a starter.
Mm-hmm. So are you a reluctant go forward with Evan Turner right now, or are you an enthusiastic? Like that's Evan Turner. When he's in the starting lineup, and I think you and Dave touched on this a little bit, Evan Turner being a third ball handler as well, so that Dame and CJ can do some more running around to get free of those doubles.
Yeah, absolutely. If all of a sudden, if Evan Turner gets a mismatch on somebody in the paint, you have to help now. You can't just go, we can just live with that shot. And then the second you help, you've got a Nurkic on the backside of the paint, on the opposite side, and you've got Aminu in one corner, and he had a bad game against Charlotte, but I think he's been spectacular this season otherwise. And then you've got Dame up top and CJ on the backside of the play. Like that's an issue now that your team has to deal with. And that's why I think having Aminu, and I know a lot of people want Aminu to play the three. It makes sense, especially if Evan Turner is going to start, to have Aminu at the four, because you have someone who's even a remotely capable shooter at the four on the floor.
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry. After you you kind of lost me a little bit after you started talking about how amazing Aminu is, because I'm pretty sure that there's someone been talking about Aminu as a really positive addition to this team all year. I can't quite think of who you have definitely led the Aminu hive, and I've been right there alongside you as far as like what he's given to this team. If he's going to give you 40% from three and give you 4 attempts a night, there's no reason. And I think over the last month he's averaging almost 5. Yeah, I'm actually looking at it right now. So since November 30th, Aminu is shooting 47% from the field, 50% from three, and he's shooting over 5 threes a game, and he's giving you 6 rebounds. Do you think he should be getting more shots a game, or do you think it's just about right? To me, it feels just
perfect.
about right.
And that's why people talk about we need to get him the ball more. No, you don't need to get him the ball more. And that's not a shot at Aminu. It's his efficiency and his effectiveness is exactly where it should be. If you start force-feeding guys shots over and over and over, it's the same reason you don't see Kyle Korver, or you never saw Kyle Korver getting 25 shots a night. It's the same reason you don't see J.J. Redick getting those shots. Any of these guys, like the only guys that get shots in that volume that are knockdown shooters are legit superstars because they have a whole nother set of moves that they can go to. And Aminu, you still worry when guys close out on him and he has to put the ball on the floor. But he's got a nice one dribble pull up, and I trust him with 2 dribbles in a straight line to the rim. So if he's
gotten
the space
better.
Yes, it's not the wild adventures of Al-Farouq Aminu in dribbling every time he puts the ball on the floor now. So that's a nice change.
He also hands it over to Dame or CJ if he gets it at the other end of the court. I have a question about Aminu that we kind of talked a little bit about the other night. In the off season, or for years actually, there's been tons of talks about how Portland just needs a 3-and-D guy. We need a 3-and-D guy. I'm looking at Aminu right now and thinking he's the closest thing to a 3-and-D guy. What is it that makes a 3-and-D guy? And do you think the way you categorize a 3-and-D player, would you consider Aminu a 3-and-D player? Do you think he's considered one in the league, or what else does he have to do to be considered one?
Aminu's been a 3-and-D player now for 2 years, in my mind.
Okay, so you consider him one. Yes. He hits enough threes to fulfill that aspect of it.
Honestly, if you play enough defense, well, let's start with the 3-point. To me, if you're shooting at least 36%, like 35% is like the bottom line, like net return that you can have, with the right amount of volume. If you're shooting at least 4 threes at 35%, that's the least amount of return that you can have and be a 3-and-D guy, in my opinion.
Okay.
The only hesitation I have for Aminu as far as being a 3-and-D guy, and he is a 3-and-D guy, he has positional flexibility, but he's not a guy who's going to go down a bunch of positions. He's a guy that can go down 1 or 2, and he can even move up to the 5 when necessary. He's so big that it's not necessarily a good thing when he goes down and covers 1s and 2s, if that makes any sense.
So you think that he's better at playing the higher position,
3, 4,
the
and
center,
5.
the other power forwards, the small forwards. He has more trouble with guards just because of his height and his lankiness makes it hard for him.
Well, just his size in general. Like he has good foot speed, and his lateral mobility is good, but he makes up for any of those shortcomings because his anticipation and his instincts are very, very good. We saw it against Kemba. The chase down block was phenomenal. And it's not like Aminu is LeBron James, or even the guy on the other side of that team, and Nick Batum, where he just kind of glides down the floor and chases guys down regularly. He anticipated the play and attacked it aggressively, and he's got one hell of a reach. And it was just mwah. It was a perfect play. It was everything coming together because of the instincts, the natural ability, and his athleticism.
Well, and what do you think about how they're talking about him, how he got help from Evan Turner on that one? I mean, those are,
Evan Turner did steer him. Evan Turner kept him getting to the other side of the rim. There's no doubt about that. I'm so conflicted about Evan Turner this season because it's those kind of little veteran plays that I really like and appreciate out of him. Evan Turner's a smart player. There's no doubt about that. He does.
And then, what happened with that inbound thing?
Okay.
I mean, he looked super mad about that. And I don't know if he was mad at himself or if he was mad at himself.
He thought that Nurk was going to come. I think it was.
So he just misread which way.
Yeah. So
shouldn't that be a drawn up play?
Yeah.
They should be running. Shouldn't they know what they're doing in
Dan
that?
Sheldon on Talking Ball talked about it. Over the past couple of years, the Blazers, really in the Stotts era, the Blazers have had been one of the better teams in the entire league in after timeout plays. It feels like this year they're just Yosemite Salmon themselves, just shooting themselves in the foot over and over and over again on these out of bound plays. And that's another thing we talked about, was like the ability to win that game. Like, why or how did they win that game considering plays like that were being made? That's how wacky.
Right, but then there
that
were also plays like there were also plays like Aminu's chase down, and then Aminu also had a really nice rebound at the end that saved everything. If he had not gotten his hands on that, the Charlotte would have had another shot at it. So, I don't know. It's just one of those things. We've talked about this game in like so much detail. I don't want to keep going over it because
this game is like a microcosm of the Blazers season, and I think that's why I'm so wrapped into it. Is that so many things could have gone wrong, yet somehow they figured it out. Like that's the Blazers. If you look at all three of these games, there was a good chance that they lose all of them. And if they had lost these games, we'd be talking about Portland on an 8-game losing streak. Yeah. And instead, they're on a 3-game winning streak. And I think that's the fine line that this team is walking this entire season. Like they just don't have.
But you're still mad about it, aren't you? You're still mad that they won that game.
I am. I keep going back to the whole general idea of this team is just flawed fundamentally, and that winning these games in the long run isn't going to do them any favors. I think that's where my frustration mostly stems from.
I see where you're coming from, because it's like if you just are squeaking by and you're getting by like by the seat of your pants all the time, it would be great to like have confidence. I mean, I remember those games where Terry Stotts and Terry Porter and Clyde Drexler were leading the team, and they'd be down.
You go into 60 games a season
with the beginning of the fourth quarter, and it would be like. Well, no, but they'd like dig themselves into a big hole and be like, that's no problem. They got plenty of time. They're coming back. And, like you could understand that other teams went on runs, but our team would definitely match them and would also go on the same kind of run. And back when the Trailblazers this year were down in Washington and they came back, that was the first time that I was like, oh, they could come back from this. And then they did, and then I got my hopes all up, and then they struggled right after that. So you can't get too attached to any one game. That's kind of what I've learned.
Dwight said it perfectly the other night in the post game. He made a joke about making a college career out of getting C's. This Blazers team is just getting C's right now. Like they're just barely passing. Now their record is obviously above 500, but I mean they are literally. They're a couple coin tosses away from being just down in the dregs record-wise. That's how close things are. And it's so weird and both frustrating to be on the positive side of it when at the same time you're just sitting here thinking, they really shouldn't be.
I'm just trying to appreciate it because you never know what's going to happen. Everything could like really fall off the rails. And, even if these games are happening where like you are saying, I am not saying, but you're saying like they had no business winning that. Even with all of this stuff happening, there's still interesting things going on. There's still things to learn. There's still things to watch for. And, hey, bonus. We're getting wins.
Yeah, I mean,
some of them. We could be like, Memphis right now. I mean, they are just struggling, just mightily.
But they're also looking at probably landing one of the top 3 prospects in this draft, and those 3 guys are looking like franchise changers. So that's something always to keep in the back of the mind.
I see where you're going with that. Okay.
I'm not going to go down that road right now. I'm just not going to do it.
I know.
It's not even Christmas yet.
Right. We'll wait for that. I got a couple more questions about just sort of the lineup lately. Because I feel like
you're going to do this to me, aren't you?
Yes, I am.
Oh, God.
Take a deep breath. So we've seen Zach Collins get some significant minutes over the last few games.
Yeah, we have.
I would like to know what have we learned about Zach Collins in these last several games where he's seen action?
He moves well and he anticipates defensively very well.
What do you mean by he moves well?
For a guy who's 7 foot tall, he moves very well. He covers ground. He anticipates.
He knows where he needs to be. Is that what you're saying? And then he's able to get there in a timely manner?
Even if he doesn't know where he needs to be, he gets to where he should be eventually. And that's rookie stuff that I'm not going to beat him over the head with. But for everybody who's sitting here championing Zach Collins, he's great offensively. No, he's not. He's shooting like 36% from the floor. He's a great three-point shooter. He's shooting like 24% from the floor. He's a great rebounder. He got
a key shot at the end. I mean, he got in a game where the Blazers were struggling down the stretch. He did hit a key three-pointer.
He did hit a key three. And
Charlotte.
I've seen him in other games where he had like 6 hitches in his jumper. Like I said, I don't want to beat up the kid. I don't think he's ready. I don't think he should be out there. I know people, he got 10 rebounds in the game. Go back and literally click on the video for every one of those rebounds. I don't think he had one contested rebound in that entire set.
You know, I did that. I watched all of them, and there were a few where he had to fight with Ed Davis on them.
Oh, sorry. He had to fight with his teammate to get one. Yeah. So so everybody punching that line about he pulled down 10 rebounds. Literally anybody who was in the vicinity could have had that rebound. But he got it. Yeah, okay, great. But he's not out there as this dynamic rebounder that's just taking over the backboards. They're literally gifting it. Honestly, and this is going to just sound like I'm picking on him now, I think that some of the guys are letting him get them to get his confidence going. And I don't think that's a bad idea.
Right, because you've been very concerned about him getting too many minutes too early and having his confidence be shaken. Do you see any signs that his confidence is being shaken?
When David West spiked him to the floor like a volleyball, definitely saw some confidence shaken.
Okay.
There was
That's one example.
There was he had a spin move against Charlotte. I can't remember who he was on. He spun to the middle and got an open shot, and then he missed the layup by about 3 feet to the left. And then I saw him shaking his head as he was going up and down the floor. And then he had a baby hook against Orlando, I want to say. It was Orlando or Miami, but he backed somebody down and left the hook 1.5 foot short. So, yeah, everything really boils down to confidence, strength, and strength. So
let me ask you this: while Nurkic and Myers were both out, why do you think that Stotts went to Collins and that Swanigan didn't see any time?
Honestly, I'm not certain. Maybe he wanted the flexibility defensively that Collins gives you, because Collins moves better than Swanigan. There's no doubt about that. I have no qualms admitting that whatsoever. It's maybe the thought is that he can shoot, but just watching him on the floor, other teams, it's not necessarily a shot at him. He's a rookie and they don't care. They look at him and they treat him the same way that they treat Harkless or Aminu. They're going to leave him wide open until he is a track record of knocking down shots, and we really haven't seen that. His screens, for the most part, have been ineffective, but he's 210, 215 pounds, and still a kid.
So when you hold up on the screens for a minute, because I was watching his screens, and I agree that his screens are not strong at all. They are.
It's hard to be when you're just
right.
You're not strong enough.
He's not a big guy, so I didn't see them strong, but I did see a number of them where I thought were well-timed and well-placed, because they ended up in him getting a nice little pocket pass or being available for a nice little pocket pass. I mean,
he has the instincts to set a pick and roll, pick and pop. There's no doubt about that. But none of that matters if you can't set a screen to begin with. You can have all the instincts and intelligence in the world in that aspect. I will absolutely agree that he does. He does, and then again, a lot of this fundamentally comes back to movement and instincts. Like, he has, those things appear to be there. But the requisite strength, size, toughness, tenaciousness, all the stuff that comes with being a big in 5 years, he has none of that yet.
I think that he's got more than you think that he has.
I'm not saying that I think that these are things that I expect it to be. He's a 19-year-old. Like it's not. This is what I expect. And the thing is, I don't want to say underdeveloped, but he's not a full-grown man yet. I mean, if you look at if you watch college basketball at all, look at DeAndre Ayton. He looks like David Robinson. Like that's LeBron James when he came out. Like these are guys that came in the league as full-grown men, and that's a rarity. And that's why it usually takes bigs to come in a few years to come in the league. And even Myers Leonard was still pretty lean when he came in the league, but he was bigger than Zach. And it's just going to take a few years for that to happen. And you're going to continue to see guys push him around, get him off his spot, not allow him to get to where he wants to be. His screens will continue to be ineffective. And that's just the nature of the beast. Like he has to physically grow. Like he has to get stronger. He has to get thicker. He has to get bigger, and he has to get tougher in order to be everything that he can be. And again, those aren't shots fired at Collins. It's just the nature of the beast. He's just not physically there yet.
As far as I can tell, your biggest concern is his youth and his size, and that he needs to grow and he needs to, be physically bigger, physically stronger.
Things that you can't learn through the season. It's just a matter of time of getting there, and that's why I don't want to see him necessarily thrown out to the wolves, because what happens is what David West did to him in that Golden State game.
Yeah. Well, okay. It was Golden State and it was David West.
But there's guys like that all up and down every roster in the league.
Yeah.
I mean,
I'm not going to say I understand exactly what's going on, because I have people keep asking me, why are they playing Collins and not Swanigan? Why are they playing Collins and not Myers? And I don't know the answer.
The Myers thing, I think, is
theories.
because he's still sick. The Swanigan thing, maybe there's something going on in practice that we're just not seeing.
So that was one of my things that is, I think that we don't know what's going on in practice, and maybe Collins is just balling out in practice, and coach wants to give him time, and coach is like, we're going to give you some extended time, and then later on, after Biggie shows some stuff, then he'll give Biggie the same treatment.
And Stotts is just trying to see what sticks to the wall.
Right. Well, and Dwight James had an interesting point at the Talking Ball or whatever show they'd play right after the Blazer game. He was saying that at this point, Terry or the organization might want to – sorry, Coach Stotts. I always call him Terry. That's so embarrassing. Coach Stotts and the organization, because of the situation that they're going into next year with, Ed Davis being done with his contract, Nurkic being, a restricted free agent, they really need to see what they have in the center. And Dwight James's point was that maybe at this point they feel like they know what they have in Myers. Myers has shown, and they really need to get Zach Collins out there so they can see what they have in Zach Collins right now, just to give them a good measurement of where they are.
I mean, it makes sense.
You think that's at all possible?
No, it absolutely makes sense from a financial standpoint, especially if you're gun shy after handing out money to Turner, Crabbe, Harkless, and Leonard, about handing 17, 18 to up to 20 million to Nurkic.
Mm-hmm.
Like, let's just say a hypothetical here. Nurkic rolls his ankle again sometime in the season. He only plays like 55, 60 games.
Mm-hmm.
Like that basically goes down as like Nurkic hasn't played a single full season in his entire rookie career, his entire rookie contract.
Mm-hmm.
So are you really comfortable giving him that max contract if you don't know the guy behind him, possibly? Because if Ed Davis leaves, Collins is probably the next guy in to fill that type of position. Kind of your flex power forward center. If you aren't comfortable with him, do you need to bring somebody in as a veteran free agent to fill in Ed Davis's spot?
Mm-hmm. So it's almost like you can kind of see why they might be playing him right now.
I get it. I disagree with it, but I can understand what they're looking at.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean,
all right.
The whole idea is that we've talked about, off the podcast is, I don't think he should be getting minutes. Okay, here's the whole synopsis of it. And this goes back to the whole 30,000 foot idea. What is the goal for this season?
Mm-hmm.
Is it to develop guys? Is it to win? I mean, where do you fall into that category? Because Zach Collins has not done anything so far this season other than be a developmental guy. Yes, he was on the floor that led a quasi comeback against Golden State. But he wasn't doing anything out there that was staggeringly amazing, where he was leading the comeback. He was just on the floor and offered some versatility. So what is it that you're hoping to pull out of this season? And I think that's where my frustration, where a lot of this stuff kind of the winning these games in the fashion they're doing, the rotations, dropping games that they shouldn't drop, the message just isn't clear as far as like what they're ultimately trying to achieve. And I think it feels like more than anything that, hey, 41, 42 wins is fine, and that's where we're gonna get to one way or the other. And I hate that mentality.
Right. No, I get where you're coming from. And I know that you've been trying to figure out and trying to identify what the identity for this team is. And it's been really hard.
We still don't know what this identity is.
Right. You've been talking about how like the one thing that you can count on is the inconsistency, and they can be like the top of the league at one thing and the very bottom of the league of another thing. It's, wildly inconsistent in that way. I'm going to throw an idea out there for the possibility of what their identity could be. And I think they should like really lean into it. And that is mayhem. I think it's just mayhem. Like I think like last night's game was the perfect example of you just don't know what's going to happen and you just have to write it out. And I think that means that we're going to be developing players. I mean, that's the Blazers are going to have a real tough time, in the playoffs, considering how much strength, there is in the West.
In the top half.
They got it right in the top of the West. I mean, Houston is just like, jaw dropping the way that they're playing right now.
They're undefeated with Chris Paul. The Warriors.
Not to mention that other team who we won't mention. Yeah. Spurs now have Kawhi back. I mean,
it's a really,
what else
really
is the team supposed
place
to do besides develop players this year?
Yeah, no, I get that, and that's why if you're gonna develop, go full development. Like why play Collins over Swanigan when you can play both?
Yeah, sure. Well, because you got a lot of money sitting on there. Okay, I think we need to move on to another topic altogether. Do you have any last words to say on this road trip so far? I think Minnesota is going to be really tough. I think that's a really tough matchup for the Blazers.
That game's going to go like completely sideways, and then Portland will find a way to win it because Minnesota has been choking games left, right, and center. Like that, yeah. You want to talk about teams that don't make any sense? That team has just been weird.
Well, right, and OKC too. I mean, there's a few teams out there that should be doing a lot better than they're doing.
Yeah, Oklahoma City has just been. I mean, that's a tire fire. They're either. And I'm of the opinion that either there's going to be one magical moment where everything clicks and they figure it out, or it's just going to go be a complete and utter disaster for the rest of the season, and one of those guys ends up getting moved before the trade deadline. But I just feel like it's going to
different story. Right. I feel like it's got to click into place. I'm just shocked that it hasn't yet. But you brought up the trade deadline, and that was the other topic that I wanted to cover tonight because December 15th is kind of the unofficial start of trade season because on December 15th, a great deal of the league, not everybody, but 90%. A great deal of them all become available. So, yeah, December 15th, it's like players who signed a contract with a new team are now available for trade, and Portland didn't have anybody who falls into that category, so there didn't mean anything for the Portland, but it opens up a whole bunch of other players in the league. So I don't want to go deep into like any specific trade proposals right now. I'd like to step back a little bit. This is the step back episode where we're just taking the 30,000 foot view of everything. And I want to kind of talk about broad strokes about trade proposals and things that happen during the trade season. So there's a significant change this year, I think, to the trades, and that is the deadline is significantly before the All-Star break.
Yep.
The deadline is going to be February 8th this year. So 10 days, I think, before the All-Star game, they have to have everything done. That means in the run up to it, they're not going to have that little period of calm during All-Star break to figure it all out. They got to have it all done well before All-Star break.
Yeah. And that's a weird position to put teams in, because now there's a tighter window for teams to make the decisions. Before it was, it was the All-Star break, and you could even see deals done during the All-Star break. That was not wasn't a
we saw that last year with Boogie.
Exactly. So teams have to make a decision whether they're going to chase or they're going to retool. If you're going to make deals at the All-Star or at the trade deadline now, you've got to do it sooner. But it's harder to do that because you don't have as many games under your belt, because the amount of games isn't available to be played by that point.
It's not going to be that big of a discrepancy this year, though, because they did start
the season a week earlier.
So,
yes.
I mean, it's still going to be, you want all the data that you can possibly get, and there's still going to be a little bit less available.
So, and that's really it's the difference between making a run and not making a run. And by a run, I mean winning 5 in a row, or 5 of 7, 7 of 11, something along those lines, or losing 7 of 11. Something a definitive answer to one of those teams in the middle of the pack in either conference that, or an injury here or there that goes, okay, pack it up for the season, we're good. Because not every franchise has the same goals when it comes to the end of the season every single year.
That's such a diplomatic way of saying it, Dan. I'm so impressed.
It is. It's just.
No, it's true. It's true.
Teams
people look and go, okay,
money.
Which way are we going to go?
Yeah, some teams care about money and the bottom dollar at the end of the season. Some care about rebuilding. Some care about building towards a title. Some just don't care, apparently. I mean, you look at the way some of these organizations are run sometimes, and you're sitting there wondering what exactly the goal is. And I think that's sometimes the problem is that the goal isn't clear. So you get these weird positions that pop up, especially some of these Eastern Conference teams that have been in the bottom for so long, like Orlando. What are they doing, or what have they been doing? They've just imagine right now if the best version
they've been giving away all their players to Neil Olshey.
Well, not only that,
until last year.
The best version of their players, right now, if they had kept them, they would have had Victor Oladipo, and Sabonis. Think about that team right now. That's a good team. That's a really good team. Instead, you've got Bismack Biyombo locked up for $18 million a year, $17 million a year for a couple more years. Terrence Ross's deal locked up. They're going to get lucky with Aaron Gordon turning into a stud, but how they deal with him and how they work forward with him still remains to be seen. But again, what's their goal as a franchise? What are they hoping to accomplish? And I think you can do that and ask that question to 30 teams or 29, 28 teams in the league. So we all know what Golden State's role is. We all know I think at this point what Houston and Cleveland are at. So 27 teams, 26 if you want to throw the Spurs in there. Right. But yeah, I mean that's just kind of the nature of the beast right now.
So when I get ready to fire up the trade machine, because I'm going to do that this year, I'm going to come up with some fantabulous trade proposals.
The one rule you have to remember. What do I need to know? The one rule you have to remember. There doesn't have to be a winner in every trade. Both teams can lose. One team can win, one team can lose. Both can win. Those rarely happen, though. And the other thing is you have to get or give value to get value. Whether or not you love Evan Turner and you want to trade him, you are not going to trade Evan Turner and Zach Collins for DeMarcus Cousins.
Right.
That's just not going to work. Oh, he's on a rookie deal. That doesn't matter. You have to give value to get value. And that's the same both ways. And you have to understand that sometimes their perceived value and their actual value to different franchises are varied. Take Yusuf Nurkic last year. The Denver Nuggets were willing to give away a first-round pick with Yusuf Nurkic. in order to facilitate his move. Now, the Phoenix Suns had no leverage with Eric Bledsoe, yet they were still able to get something of value out of the Milwaukee Bucks. It all depends on the point in time where everything kind of comes together, and that's where you're kind of hoping for one of these magical trades if you're Portland.
So looking at the who's available on Portland's team, everybody, I guess, technically, give me a rundown of who you think has the most value, or most, maybe not value, but most potential to be involved in a trade.
Ed Davis.
Mm-hmm.
He's a
going to somebody who's
a contender,
making a run
who needs
and
a big. Yeah, somebody's big gets hurt along the way. And not to throw another thing to the Warriors, but I can't remember if they have 14 or 15 on their roster. But let's say one of their bigs gets put on IR. They can use an injury exception, and I believe it would be enough to pick up a move for a guy for Ed Davis if they move somebody like Patrick McCaw in return. So, I mean,
what would Patrick McCaw bring in?
I mean, you're just talking about a wing asset for Portland. It would probably be Patrick McCaw on like a second-round pick or something like along those lines. I think McCaw is a free agent, but you would then have his bird rights that would come along with him. And I think that's the kind of deal that if you're Portland, if you're looking to move Ed Davis, you're getting either a mid to late first-round pick or somebody else on an expiring deal, and you want to get their rights. Just because the amount of money available this summer is probably going to drive the price down on some of these restricted free agents. Mm-hmm. And you're gambling that you can afford to do that and make enough moves necessary to justify giving away Davis. Either that or you're just trying to load up on assets and hope you can hit another home run in the draft.
So the Blazers next year have 4 players who are, I believe, going to be restricted. I think that's what I'm saying. So we've got Pat Connaughton, Shabazz, Nurkic, and Noah Vonleh. I think they were all part of that same draft class. And so, what's the value of those types of contracts?
Vonleh could be somebody that he's probably next on my list. If somebody out there still thinks that he has another gear in him, because he's still young. No doubt he's still young. He's nowhere close to his prime. So he could still possibly figure it out. And I think he's shown with Portland he can do 2 things really well. He can be a flex defender at the 4 or the 5, and he can rebound the hell out of the ball. Mm-hmm. And those are both valuable commodities. I mean, it took Ed Davis a few years in the league to figure out if he just did those 2 things, that he could make decent money and become a valuable asset to an NBA team. And I think Vonleh could be in that same kind of category with more size and athleticism, and probably more offensive skill if he ever kind of clicks it all together. So if somebody thinks that he could probably figure it out, and they're willing to pay him as a restricted free agent and willing to give up an asset to get him, you could see something like that coming together. Napier's probably another guy who should be running as a backup point guard around the league. He's probably one of the better backup point guards in the league as far as, I don't know about necessarily running your offense, but dictating pace and being a lead guard, a scoring guard. He can set guys up for sure, but he can
come in and get buckets.
Exactly, and he can lead your second unit too. I think if you have another ball handler out there with him, where they can kind of split duties, much like Dame and CJ kind of do. I think Napier is, I don't want to say a poor man's version of that, but I think he's in that same kind of mold. Mm-hmm. Connaughton, I think, will end up staying here if he stays in the league. Mm-hmm. If he doesn't opt to go play baseball, I think he ends up staying here, and I think he has a role here. I think ultimately it comes down to, he's a restricted free agent, so it ultimately comes down to money. I just don't think anybody's going to throw a crazy deal at Pat Connaughton. I think a lot of teams have learned the value of guys like him and going way overboard to throw those kind of deals out there. So if I don't, unless Pat's deal helps facilitate something else, and the return is great, I don't see him being included because as a shooter, he's fantastic for the value and the price and probably the expected price of what he's going to get in the offseason. And Portland just can't afford to give those guys away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man, it's going to be interesting to see. You and Dave talked about. I think you brought it up about how Portland 2 years ago kind of decided which path they were going to be on. That was the analogy that you talked about. You said, when they put out all those money for all those big contracts, they chose the path that they were going on. And I was thinking about that, and I was thinking about how, when you're on a path that you have like three choices, you can stay on the path and go wherever it's going to go. You can get off the path and take the risk of, getting lost, getting completely out of your way, or also the risk of, ending up somewhere terrific. Or you can stay in place and hug a tree and wait for someone to come and rescue you. Which direction do you think it is most likely that the Blazers will take, going into this trade season and then also in the offseason?
It's Portland, so it's tree hugger.
You don't think they're going to just keep walking down the path? I think they're just going to keep walking down the path because that's what they said they're going to do, and that's what they're going to do.
It's tongue in cheek when I say tree hugger, and that's not a shot at the Portland organization. I think the vast majority of organizations in the NBA do the same thing when they get to a spot like this. Because if you go full rebuild, or if you ditch your assets or whatever you try to do, you're probably costing yourself a job. Mm-hmm. If you try something crazy and swing for the fences, if it fails, you're costing yourself a job. So maintaining the status quo
is the
safest bet. And I think that's human nature. Like me and everybody else who wants to question Neil O'Shea and every other GM in the league, the ultimate idea of asking these guys to risk their job to make a move. Granted, I don't like a lot of the decisions that Neil O'Shea has made. I was particularly in free agency. I just don't. I'm on record as saying that. But sitting here and demanding that he make a deal that's going to cost him his actual livelihood.
You can understand why he's not doing that.
Yeah. I mean, I would love to be able to say if I was in his spot, I would do this, and this. Really? I would do this, and this if I knew that there was a better than 50% chance that this could blow up my face. I mean, I don't know. That's tough. I mean, I'm pretty risky, but even I like my money.
Yeah, you like to know where your next meal is coming from.
Yeah, I mean, Paul Allen's checks cash every single time. It's tough to say no to that.
So there's some big names out there that people are talking about, from other teams. I don't know that Portland is necessarily in the conversation with them because they're mostly big guys, but guys like DeAndre Jordan, Marc Gasol. What do you think the likelihood of them being moved before the trade deadline?
I think Gasol's very good. I think DeAndre Jordan's very good.
The likelihood of them being moved? Yeah.
I think there's good chances. And, I mean...
Do you think Portland would do anything so risky as trading away Nurkic at the deadline?
For Boogie? Yeah. For Gasol?
What about for DeAndre Jordan?
No.
You don't think so?
Too one-dimensional.
Okay.
And Dame doesn't take advantage of DeAndre Jordan's best asset offensively, which is diving to the rim and catching lobs.
Oh God, I just want somebody who can catch lobs and throw.
DeAndre does it. There's no doubt about it.
I know he really does.
It's just that's just not in Dame's bag. It's not to say he can't throw a lob. It's just not in his bag to be that guy.
It's just a reminder to me about how much I love those and how infrequently they happen.
Yeah, Portland. The only guy in recent Portland memory who threw lobs was Andre Miller. And you could say Mason Plumlee was a lob catcher, but even then it's kind of meh. But Greg Oden, in the few games that he played, was the last time we had somebody who when rolling down the middle struck the fear of God in you when he was catching the ball above the rim. Now, granted, that was once, every 3 seasons, but it was still the ability and the threat of that was huge. But it was because it could be reciprocated on both ends.
Kind of like LeBron against Brooke Lopez the other night.
Yeah.
That was great.
Yeah, Brooke Lopez had a really bad quarter. Rim checking the alley-oop, airballing 2 free throws. That's just a case of, just I don't know if it was the yips or if he just, he was channeling his brother there. That just happens. It was just a bad quarter. I mean, it happens to, I think, everybody. Just more often than not for pros, it just happens during practice and we never see it.
Well, let's wrap up this trade talk and tell me on a scale of 1 to 100, how likely do you think it is that the Blazers make any kind of a trade at all before the deadline?
See, now this is difficult because if you're to believe,
because you're trying to think about it, I always just give my gut or gut answer.
Like I have 2 gut instincts, but one is based on something happening or not happening, and that's on if the Blazers, if they fall apart at all, and I would never want this in a million years, but if Terry Stotts is removed as head coach, then I'd say that the chances of them making a deal are near 100%. Because they're signaling.
Would that be a deal to break it all up, get under, free up as much money as possible?
I don't think it would be that crazy, but I think they would try to move at minimum Evan Turner's contract. I think they would try to move one of the deals, which maybe would require Nurkic. But again, we're talking about extremes here. So, because I don't think...
I just can't imagine Terry Stotts. Do you really think do you think he is in trouble? I'm having a hard time trying to figure that out.
I think these last couple games have saved the momentum from going really heavy to the negative. But they haven't won any of these games convincingly either, to where those that are really railing against it have anything to back off on. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So this schedule is about to get just stupid dumb. It gets painfully brutal. We've talked about it, Blazers Edge. I outlined everything over the next couple weeks, and it's ugly. And if they find themselves 4 or 5 games under 500 and they lose horribly like they did it during that homestand in a bunch of those, I think the momentum is already built up behind some of this negativity that it could happen. And this is the first time I can remember saying that.
Yeah, it's the first time in a long time where we've actually thought it could possibly be in the discussion.
The fact that it's even even the slightest inklings of it, I've heard stuff like this before, but I always just kind of kicked it to the side. There's no way in hell that is even close to possible. But just talking to people that I've talked to around the league, the reality of it being something that could happen is it's finally touching within the bounds of, it could if X, Y, Z and everything else happens, which is very different from saying it's going to happen or it could happen. I think we're just in the realm of possibility where the thought could happen now. So I think it's still a very long way away. But in the NBA, things can change quite rapidly. The narrative can just gather ahead of steam and just screw with everything.
That's really true. So I was listening to the Ben Golliver Open Floor podcast.
Shout out to Ben Golliver.
From last week or the week before, and they were talking, and he made a really interesting comment where he said the worst thing for Dallas right now is that one of the things that's really hard for Dallas right now is that they have a great coach who refuses to lose. And that made me think of Memphis. And not that I'm saying this is what happened, but for everybody who was so shocked about what happened in Memphis, maybe that somehow figured into the management decision where they were like, David Fizdale is going to hang on and try to drive this team to as many wins
if you're going to trash
we
a season,
can get.
If you're going to trash a season, you have to fire the coach.
Right.
No ifs, ands, or buts.
Yeah.
The only way that you can get away with not doing that is if you just have injuries up and down your roster. That's the only way you can get away. And those are
right.
so
and everybody
few
is
and
coming
far
back.
Yeah. And there's so few and
so
far
you don't want to blow it up. Right.
Yeah. But otherwise you have to get a new voice in there, because that voice that's been in there has been building a culture, building whether they're a winner or not. Every coach in the league is just like every player. They're playing for their next, or they're coaching for their next paycheck. Mm-hmm. And that's the most base thing you can say about it. But you're never going to have a coach that's going to be okay with losing. Even in Brett Brown's situation, he's still hoping these guys win as the Sixers, but he was given subpar talent on the lowest level. Now we see him with, good talent with this Philadelphia team. Lo and behold, Brett Brown looks like a pretty decent coach, right? So you're building this idea of wanting to always give everything, always to win. When the management and the organization shifts the idea away from winning being paramount, you have to change the messenger. Otherwise, nobody's going to listen to that coach, because everything that he has now said is just hypocritical.
Right, and everyone's going to be even more miserable on top of
and you're going to have
losing. Then they're going to be even more miserable.
Else.
Yeah.
So make the coach the scapegoat, or make even the GM the scapegoat, or the owner the scapegoat by firing the coach. Mm-hmm. Because even if all the players, they're angry at a GM, like, let's say the Grizzlies, they're livid at the GM for firing Fizdale, which I'm certain there's probably a fair amount that are. They're not going to be mad at the next coach that comes in. They're not going to look at him like a scab. JB Bickerstaff could end up being a guy that they really love and they want to play for. That's why you always see the interim coaches get kind of a boost. That team gets a boost and they win a few games.
It's because it's usually before they play the Portland Trailblazers.
Well, that's true too. But the players want to show that, oh, hey, it was the coach's fault. It wasn't us, because they're playing for a paycheck.
Right.
And that's what it all fundamentally is what this stuff comes down to a lot of the time, is that kind of idea of everyone's competitive and everybody wants to play for their next deal. And that's just a base feeling. That's not a bad thing or a negative thing. It's just that's the fundamental idea of wanting to be a professional.
Right. Okay, well, this is sliding into depressing territory, and last week was depressing enough. So we have to end on a high note, Dan. Hey, that's my challenge to you.
It was not my fault. Dave Dufour took it and made it even more depressing than I normally do.
I cannot leave you two alone together ever again. I listened to it twice, and he just kept saying, "Oh, this is so depressing." And I was just thinking, "Oh my gosh, this can't be happening." I left a note. I gave you specific instructions.
There was nothing about being depressed or not. That was just how it was going to go. So what's your positive note? What's your positive note? Come on.
I wasn't prepared to have one.
I mean, okay, the Blazers have won 3 straight, and they have a chance to go 4-1 on this road trip. That's a good thing if you're looking holistically at this Blazers team.
And they also have a lot of road games coming up, and I really am. The more I think about it, the more I think these road games are good for them.
The less you want them at home.
Well, no, but I think it's good for them. I mean, when you look at it, it seems like a small thing and it seemed insignificant, but they didn't have their, bonding trip at the beginning of the year. They just all showed up and started working, right? It's, they didn't have that time where they got to get together and really focus on each other away from everybody. And I think that they missed it. And, I don't think that's the whole reason that they didn't come out.
Is that why Dame gave up on vegan?
Not everybody's perfect, man.
Hey, I would smash on salt-based short ribs too.
And that doesn't necessarily mean that he's completely fallen off the wagon. I don't know where we are on this. I don't know what the current status is.
I want to know what Dame eats before every game so I could check his vegan to actual protein, like meat consumption, and get a point value off of what diet is producing better.
Well, we'll have to get somebody to follow him around. I don't know. I think that's another not positive. Here's a positive note. I really like how Nurkic got his haircut and he's like growing in the full-on beard. That works for him.
He is embracing the lumberjack mentality of Portland. There's no doubt about it.
that works for him. So that's a positive thing. He's coming into his own in that. It was nice to see him back on the floor.
You can't have a second beautiful butterfly. You already have a butterfly.
I know.
So
Aminu. Okay, there we go. Thank you. Watching Ed and Aminu this year has given me a lot of pleasure. I have to say that I love it when role players kind of have breakout seasons and they play beyond what is expected of them. And I really think both Ed and Aminu are doing that this year. I've always loved Aminu. I've always loved the adventure of him. But I've always appreciated, Ed's his intensity. I've always just loved how he goes after rebounds, like they're personally insulting him if he doesn't get them. And I really like how that's going together. But what I've noticed this season, and we'll end on this, I've seen more lately of Ed and Al-Farouq Aminu playing together. And I've been tracking this for like the last 5 games and how many minutes they've been playing together. And it's been slightly increasing. And I think it works. I think the two of them complement each other really well because they don't get in each other's way. Aminu is shooting, Ed's getting the rebounds. They're both playing effective defense. And when you put them in with that 3-guard lineup, and the 3-guard lineup that I'm talking about isn't necessarily Dame, CJ, and Shabazz. The one I'm talking about is McCollum, Shabazz, and Connaughton. I like that lineup with Davis and Aminu. I don't want to see it 25 minutes a night or anything, but I think it's a nice little second unit that can come that has some things going for it that makes it hard on other teams. So that is my positive thing, is that the unit that I've been watching and keeping my eye on seems to be prospering. And so that is what I'm going to end my pod. What do you think about that lineup? Do you think that's just like me, and
I think
two
it's
guys that
understanding
really
their roles and then having good supplemental performances around them, just like Evan Turner playing with the starters. If you get enough production in enough areas around those guys, then they're going to be allowed to shine. And I think that's really been the story of Portland's season, is supplemental production or lack thereof in instances. It
really makes a difference when they do.
So when those guys are able to check more than 1 or 2 boxes, then they can absolutely shine.
And I also feel like, barring injury, that the rotations have settled down a little bit recently. Maybe that's because some of the injured players have come back. Aminu as well again. But I feel like it's less of a just throw somebody out there and see will stick. I think probably would take exception to Collins in that. And I actually am surprised to see Collins. I wish that we were getting more Myers minutes. But for the most part, I kind of see it settling down. Unfortunately for Mo Harkless, that's been Mo Harkless on the bench and getting DMPs, which is a bummer. And it's been a lot less of Vonleh too. And, I really like to see Vonleh play. He's been playing less, but he comes in and he produces.
When things start
at least
making
on defense,
sense,
when he comes in,
that's when it's time to run. With this team, when things start making sense, it just run for the hills. I think that's the lesson to take from the past 3 weeks, because none of it does. 4-1 on the road, 0-4 at home. Now a chance to go 4-1 on the road again. I bet you if you run the numbers on that, no team in NBA history has ever done that before. It's just,
I don't know why that brings me so much pleasure. It's just so twisted. Wonky. I think it's hilarious.
Yeah. So I think that's what we're going to end on, is that all roads lead to nowhere with Portland.
Okay, not the upper that I was hoping for, but let's talk about Blazers Edge Night and remind folks that we are they can still donate tickets to Blazers Edge. I just did 5 tickets donated because I did that on the night that they played the team from the Bay Area, and I said if I said the name of the team from the Bay Area, I would donate extra tickets, and I didn't because I'm getting so good at that. So now I have to come up with a different challenge in order to donate some more tickets to Blazers Edge. But folks can go to the Blazers Edge website and follow the instructions on how to donate tickets for Blazers Edge Night. And I'm not sure how much longer they're going to be taking those donations, so people should just go ahead and take care of that now.
Down the stretch, and I believe at last count Dave said he had 1,300 tickets that have already been spoken for out of the 2,000. And then I'm talking about 1,300 that are spoken for by the groups that are going to use them. Out of the 2,000. I believe that was the last count. So they're filling up very quickly. And this is when we start getting the donations to really start coming in, is the holiday season and then into early January. Like, this is the final real big push to really kind of make it happen. So if you can donate, please do. Tickets, I believe, are $9 to $11. Is that what they are at this year, Tara?
I feel like they go up to 13.
So it's up to 13. So, but it's, if you've got the ability to make it happen, to donate 1, to donate 100, whatever you can do, please do. It's an absolutely awesome thing to see happen. The stories that come out of Blazers Edge night, which Dave usually recants a bunch of them in the post-game write-up from that night, is probably the most heartwarming and endearing thing that we get as people who work for Blazers Edge. It's an absolutely awesome experience.
So yeah, everybody get those donations made for those sending those kids and their chaperones to the game on February 27th against the Sacramento Kings. Dan, you want to tell folks where to find you on social media?
Yes, well, they can find me on social media at DMeringue. That's Danny Meringue, as it's apparently sticking now. They can also find me as the newest co-host of Blazers Outsiders on NBC Sports Northwest every non-game night at 7 p.m. on Facebook. And look for that to have some updates and changes coming soon, too, as well. I alluded to some news a few weeks ago as far as what was happening, and this is it. So thanks to everybody who's been showing up and participating in the shows and all the feedback that we're getting. So, yeah, appreciate it all.
Yeah, Dan, it's been fun to watch you because when we record, we don't actually look at each other. So I like to watch you on Facebook Live and make faces at you and act like you can see me making faces at you. So folks can catch Dan. You guys can chat at you guys, and sometimes, usually you'll answer the questions unless it's, something like snarky like I sometimes like to do. But people should enjoy doing that. You can follow Blazers Edge at Blazers Edge on Twitter. You can also find me at TCB Biggs. You can subscribe to the Blazers Edge podcast via iTunes or Google Play. We are part of the Almighty Baller Radio Network. Check out our podcast and all the other awesome NBA podcasts at almightyballer.com. Dave gave a very impassioned and wonderful, for which I am thankful, ask of people to go and rate the podcast on iTunes, because that's very important for getting it visibility. So I appreciate that.
Subscribe, unsubscribe. Do it multiple times.
That seems like cheating.
It is, and everybody does it.
All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. We will talk to you next week.